So I did it. I finally completed Final Fantasy VII Rebirth after 108 hours. I am finally free of the game's grasp, until I go back and start playing it again on hard mode anyway. But I did absolutely everything you could possibly do in this game, minus one side quest, and that's only because the last side quest in the game, unfortunately, is bugged. The last patch that came out to add all of the performance options, for whatever reason, just messed up the last side quest, and it soft locks you, and you're not able to complete it, unfortunately, which sucks. And I am kind of tired right now because I'm just coming off of the game, and the last bit of the game is an absolute roller coaster ride. There's so much that happens, and we're going to talk about some of that in today's video, because we've got an interview with Naoki Hamaguchi where he talks about life and death, and of course the ending of Rebirth. So if any of that sounds cool to you, feel free to click the like button, and if you're new here and you'd like to stick around, you can subscribe, leave a comment. It really does help out the channel a lot. So again, this article comes to us from Deadline, where they sat down with Naoki Hamaguchi to talk about a lot of things like character building, bonding, relationships, the Temple of the Ancients, as well as the ending of the game. So spoiler warning, we're going to be discussing that in today's video, and I'll be showing footage from each specific section as well. So starting off first, they talk about building bonds and fleshing out the characters, and if there was one character in particular that was really challenging to build upon this go around. Hamaguchi responds by saying, "We worked on every character quite evenly for the game, so there was not really a particular character that was treated special. However, for Red 13, his other personality, Nanaki, is different, and he also talks in a specific way that's different from how the group knows him. So with this in mind, seeing that other players were able to revisit any kind of quest or area that they would wish to explore before or after the Cosmo Canyon portion of the game, we decided to have both Red 13 voice and the Nanaki voice for whatever situation that player would be revisiting. So there was more work involved for that specific character in preparing these scenarios. And I know there's been some controversy in regards to some of the voice stuff for Red 13. I didn't mention it in my video covering Max Middleman in Red 13 because I hadn't reached that point in the story yet, but I was putting two and two together and realizing, oh, he's going to have the Nanaki voice and it's going to be completely different, a new personality, and I quite like both versions of the character. Red 13 has that really deep voice and the, intellectual facade of being very wise and noble and beyond his years, but the moment Red returns back to Cosmo Canyon and he feels safe and he sees the people that he knows and loves, he just snaps back to being Nanaki and he becomes a kid again. And it's this completely new side of the character that in the original game was inferred, but because it's text-based, you don't really quite understand that, oh, it's not just a shift in tone, it's a personality thing. He's now able to drop his guard and be who he truly is. And the moment where Barrett hears the Nanaki voice for the first time is priceless, and he's confused. And as he goes on to explain it, Nanaki is basically like, look, when I first met you guys, I wanted you to treat me as an equal, not like some sort of dog. And I think that's really great. And I really love the Nanaki side of Red because he, again, reverts to being a kid, and he basically is a kid based in his species. He's a teenager, but he's still relatively really young and inquisitive, and he grew up in a place that really loved and took care of him and cherished him. So to see the more playful younger side come out, I really enjoyed both aspects of that character. Up next, they talk about the traumas that the characters go through in the Temple of the Ancients, which is a very great sequence. Hamaguchi says, when looking at the original FF7, we had to derive a lot of the characters or storylines from perhaps sort of the more exaggerated movements of the characters in that way. And that's how the players have gone about it at that time. But today, when we are looking at and revisiting this, I do believe there's a need for us to somewhat provide our own answers to the areas that were unable to be depicted in much detail back then. Now we have the ability to do so and just go deepening into this depiction and expression. He continues, I am almost 42 years old, and within our development staff we're all quite close in age, and many of us were players and fans of the original game, as it impacted our lives quite a bit. So there is certainly this love and respect that we had and fostered within the team, and from there, it was our wish to go deeper into the story while also not straying too much from the essence of the original FF7 and what makes that game what it is. The whole entire Temple of the Ancient section is absolutely insane. I actually really liked how they reimagined that entire area instead of it being how it was in the OG where you stepped on, I think it was like the different hands of the clock to go to different rooms. You're now kind of manipulating the gravity within that area to reach new areas. And once you reach the section where everyone but Cloud has to go off and face their own trauma, it is heartbreaking to see what the characters go through. Red 13 in particular, we see how he was captured and then experimented on and branded on by Hojo, which is just a heartbreaking scene to watch. We revisit Tifa's trauma of the Nibelheim flashback and seeing her father be murdered, and kind of like the genesis, no pun intended, of her wanting to become what she is today and joining Avalanche and just hating Shinra and all of this stuff. The flashback with Yuffie and what she went through with Sonon and losing him again and seeing Nero and getting some new dialogue even with Nero. And I think he might be somebody that shows up in part 3. I think they might bring back Deep Ground to kind of maybe put a pin on Yuffie's storyline when you go back to Wutai. So that's going to be something that we got to look out for. And then you've got Barrett, young Barrett, which I loved his outfit. I don't know if it's unlockable in the game, but that's an outfit I would love to have for him to wear later in the game. But we see him, in the early stages of, Shinra taking over and everyone's happy. And then the reactor blows up and everything goes to hell. And we see his wife. And I think this might be the first time we've actually seen Barrett's wife. I don't recall if she was in the OG game, but we're seeing her now in full HD in detail, and watching him lose her is horrible. And then the one that really got me was little Aerith and what she goes through, because we've seen her story before in the OG game. We've heard about it, but now it's fleshed out so much and we're able to play it ourselves that experiencing what she goes through is so sad. And everything involving young Aerith just absolutely wrecks me. From 7 Remake, where they see the flashback of her as a kid in the train graveyard and she's playing hide and seek and everyone just bails on her. That was so sad to see, and seeing her trying to get help from the people around her and no one's listening, or they're being mean to her or just kind of dismissing her until Elmira shows up. That entire sequence is so heartbreaking to watch, but it really just again fleshes out the characters, fleshes out their arcs, and because of today's technology, they can do that now. Up next, they ask Hamaguchi about crafting the Loveless section of the game when the characters go back to the Gold Saucer and get to actually be participants in the Loveless play. And to kind of just summarize what Hamaguchi says about this, so we can kind of get towards the end with the ending, he talks about how in the original game, the Loveless play was kind of depicted as more of like a high school theater production, and that's kind of how it was. I remember it being really silly and goofy, but this time around it is so beautiful. It's treated more seriously, and we kind of see 2 different versions of Loveless. We see the opening with Jessie and all of the different dancers and these really crazy effects, just kind of telling the story through song of Loveless. And then we actually get to see our characters transported into the world of VR, and they are now becoming the cast of Loveless. And it's this really awesome section of the game where the characters just kind of get to have a little bit of fun and not really stress about the outside world and Sephiroth. And we get to see these super cool outfits and really fun stage stuff. And I was not expecting the mini game to pop up where you have to, do the quick time events, which gave me anxiety. But the costumes in that section in particular are great. And if they don't have those costumes as unlockable costumes for post-game content, what are you doing, Hamaguchi? You guys got to put that in there. Cloud's outfit in particular looks super badass, and that whole entire section is just so well done. And then you've got Aerith singing her song, and there's so many layers to it, because it's like she's singing to Cloud, but you can also view it as her singing to the entire group, because she's somebody who came into these people's lives and changed them and affected them, and she's still going to see them again one day. And I think that's a really beautiful scene. I completely understand now why Genesis was such a fanboy over Loveless. Having seen it myself now, I get you, Genesis. I completely understand, but you don't need to go around spouting off lines all the time. Now, to get to the really juicy stuff, which is the ending, they ask Hamaguchi specifically about the moment where Cloud and Aerith are kind of on their final date together, and Cloud looks up in the sky and he sees that rift of what seems to be like the world's kind of like opening up, or the world ending, so to speak. They ask him for more clarification on that, and obviously he doesn't give any because he doesn't want to spoil anything. But that just kind of leads into more talk about the ending, and I know the ending is super controversial. I heard a ton of people saying they did not like it before I even got to the ending, and when I heard that stuff, it really didn't shock me, because 7 Remake kind of had very similar reception, where a lot of people liked a majority of that game, and then they got to the ending and they hated it. What's going on? This is crazy. This doesn't make any sense. What in the Kingdom Hearts is happening? Oh no, they know more of it. But for me personally, playing 7 Remake and really just kind of marinating on that ending after I finished it, I ended up really liking it. I liked the setup. I liked the questions that they were asking. I loved the weird connections they had to Advent Children and the OG game. And this won't come as a shocker if you've watched watched my previous videos, but in regards to the ending of Rebirth, I liked it. I know that's probably me being in the minority. I'm a weird bitch, I get it, but I really do like the ending of the game. And honestly, when I think about this stuff, my brain doesn't immediately go to the negatives. My brain just kind of goes into inquisitive mode, and I start to think about, like, why are they doing this? Why did they set this up? Why are they so vague about this? And that's the biggest criticism I really see about the ending, is that it is very vague and convoluted. And it seems like that was done on purpose. And that's not me speculating. Hamaguchi literally says this. So we're going to cut to an article that we covered about a month or so ago from the Washington Post with Gene Park, where he interviewed Naoki Hamaguchi about Rebirth. But since the game has been out, they've gone back and kind of added some new quotes from Hamaguchi himself. And Hamaguchi says this specifically about the ending of the game and how they chose to present it to players. He says, "The ending we post for Rebirth does lead itself to various interpretations. The creator team, myself included, was quite aligned in our overall direction and approach to this ending and how we chose to express it." So they did this on purpose, and I'm not making any excuses for them. If you're someone who did not like the ending, I completely understand why. It is very convoluted. They set a lot of stuff up. There's a lot of vague things that happen. So I completely understand why someone would not like the ending to this game. You're completely valid in feeling that way. But I think the reason why they did that is because they are fans, and I think they know what people's reactions are going to be, and I think they kind of know what expectations the fans have based on the reception to 7 Remake, and with them being fans themselves. So they know people are going to theory craft like crazy, they're going to speculate on certain things. I'm going to do that in about a few seconds based on what's happening. So yeah, I completely understand if people didn't like the ending. I personally didn't have an issue with it. I'll probably like it the more I think about it, but I do have a critique, and I've seen some other people bring this up. I believe Maximilian Dude in particular recently brought this up, in that for me personally, this is not from Max, this is me personally, I really like the story of the 7 Remake project. I like what they're doing. I like the changes they've made. I like how they're adding characters into spots where they weren't in the original. I think that stuff is fascinating. The overarching story is great. It's how they choose to deliver that and structure it, which is a bit of a problem, because Remake and Rebirth both do this thing where they wait until like the last bit of the game, maybe the last 90%, 95%, to give you all of this story stuff. And they set everything up all at once at the very end, which can be very overwhelming, and that can lead to things being very convoluted, especially if you're someone who isn't really all that familiar with the OG game or the compilation of FF7. So that's a luxury that they have now, because Remake set up Rebirth. Rebirth is clearly setting up Part 3. But in Part 3, they gotta hit a home run. They don't have the luxury of a Part 4 to set things up. They really do have to take all of that story stuff, and instead of saving it for the ending and giving us all the revelations, they really gotta spread that out throughout the game to make it a much easier pill to swallow. And I hope that they do that, and I think they kind of really don't have a choice but to do that. And considering this crazy thing here, when you really think about it, from Remake to Rebirth, that's literally just the first disc of FF7 OG, which means that Part 3 is going to be disc 2 and 3, which granted, disc 3 was basically a lot of asset stuff and all of the kaiju battles, but I think a lot of fans would agree that disc 2 is when FF7 gets really, really good, because we've lost Aerith, and now we're continuing on forward, and we're going to get introduced to those weapons. We're going to globetrot and do all this crazy stuff. So I loved Rebirth. Like, at the very end of the day, I don't plan on doing a review, but I love this game. It kind of has everything that I want as a fan, as a gamer. Great combat, great characters, great music. I enjoyed exploring the world, minus Gungaga, which was a little bit of a headache. But other than that, this is quickly becoming like one of my top games of all time, and I can't wait to go through and play it again at a slower pace and just really absorb all of the extra details that I may have missed on my first go around. Now, to get back to the ending, again, a lot of stuff happens, but it ends essentially with the death of Aerith. They even do a fake out when it comes to Aerith's death. They make you think, holy crap, Cloud just blocked Sephiroth, but nope, turns out he did not. She still ended up dying, and I immediately reverted back to my 7-year-old self and experienced that same trauma of crying because Aerith is dead, and now I've been thrown into this battle, and they're playing her theme music during the battle. So I had to quickly just kind of get myself together. So they unlocked my childhood trauma, and it felt like I was a little kid again. But there's so much that goes on and that raises questions. And the one thing that really sticks out to me is once Aerith has been killed and Cloud is there holding her, everyone else shows up and they see Sephiroth. And then Tifa looks at Cloud and Aerith, and what she sees is not what everyone else is seeing. She is seeing Cloud holding Aerith in a much different position. There seems to be way more blood, but it's different from how Cloud is actually holding her in reality. So I have no idea why they chose to do that. Why is Tifa seeing something different? Is it Sephiroth messing with her to try and, create doubt among her and the group? I don't know. That's another vague thing. The other thing is when Cloud and Aerith are on their, final date, which is essentially, her saying goodbye to Cloud because she knows what's coming. She knows she's gonna die. We see them in a different world, and it's not the main timeline that we're used to. And we see them go outside, and Aerith tells Cloud, don't look up at the sky. Naturally, when you tell someone not to look up, they're gonna do it. And he does that. And again, like the article mentions, he sees that rift in the sky. The only other time we've seen that rift was in Zack's world, his timeline. And it's pretty clear by the end of this cutscene that, yeah, Aerith has found a way to teleport herself and Cloud away from Sephiroth in a place where he can't find them yet, and that's in Zack's world. And we learn that later because Sephiroth, the voice of God, shows up and he goes, oh, something along the lines of, I finally found you. You've hidden him in this world. So Aerith found a way to somehow get Cloud to the other timeline to keep him safe. We see Zack show up. He has an encounter with Sephiroth. Sephiroth then somehow sends him to another plane of dimension before inevitably going back after Aerith. And then there's another sequence. I know there's so much going on right now. I apologize for the length of this video, but we see Cloud and Sephiroth in this endless white void. And Sephiroth is talking to him about these different worlds, and he shows 3 different bubbles. One, I'm assuming, represents Cloud's main timeline. The other represents Zack's. And then there's a third one. He doesn't really talk about that third one. I'm starting to think that third one is the OG FF7 timeline because, again, I'm under the belief that this, again, is a sequel. The OG FF7 stuff did happen, and this is an alternate timeline kind of thing. So we might be looking at something in part 3 where this is pretty crazy. What if all 3 of these worlds converge into one point, and we have the OG Cloud fighting alongside new Cloud and new Zack? It's so crazy the possibilities that they are setting up with the part 3. And again, this is me just pulling stuff out of my butt. I have no idea what direction they're gonna go in. And then you get this really awesome, exhausting battle with Jenova. And it's just so insane. The fight itself is so much fun, but how it's structured, the different phases, the incredible music. You're essentially fighting Jenova in the second to last section that we had in the OG game before you get to Sephiroth, where you're hopping down the different rocks and you're fighting what looks like to be in the live stream or some sort of form of it. And honestly, I think this is a really good preview of how we're gonna fight the weapons in part 3. We're gonna have our different sections of party members in different parts of the environment. We're gonna fight in one section, it's gonna transition to the next group, and then it's gonna go from there. So I really do think that's a setup for how we're gonna fight the weapons later on, which is gonna be super sick. And then we got the one thing that I had speculated on. I was hoping for it to happen. I wanted to see it. We got Cloud and Zack teaming up, fighting Sephiroth. And it's our first real taste of Zack combat. With all of his abilities and materia being fully utilized and unlocked, his combo system, his charge abilities to charge up his abilities so they can do more damage. All of that was just so much fun. A lot of fan service that I really appreciated. And of course, I didn't even say this, Bizarro Sephiroth shows up, or as they call him in this one, Sephiroth Reborn. So I think it's pretty clear that in part 3, we're just gonna go straight to safer Sephiroth. And I think it'd be super dope if they just called him the One-Winged Angel instead of safer Sephiroth. So that battle was super fun, and then we get to come back with Aerith. She shows back up. She goes, hi Sephiroth, I've got Game Shark. You can't get rid of me that easily. So she teams up with Cloud, and we fight Sephiroth one more time before he eventually flies off because, again, he clearly knows there's so much more going on. I think he knows what's going to happen, and he's probably got a really good feeling that he's going to win at the end of the day, even though I think we're going to stop him. And then we get to the part that I think throws a lot of people off, and I think turns a lot of people off, and that's what the heck is happening to Aerith? So it's pretty clear that she's dead. Everyone sees her as being dead, except for Cloud. Cloud, for whatever reason, can still see Aerith and communicate with her. It's like she's some sort of Force ghost out of Star Wars or something. But it's only him. Everyone else can't see her. So it's almost like Cloud has now become like this weird kind of conduit between Aerith and the live stream and Zack's world, because he's seeing other things too that the group cannot. And again, it goes back to that rift in the sky where he tells everyone, don't look up. Naturally, Barrett looks up. but they don't see anything but a beautiful blue sky. Cloud doesn't see that. He sees the rift again, so he's seeing other things. I don't know. I don't know what's happening, but again, that's one of the reasons why I like this stuff, is because it makes me think about what they could possibly do, what's going to happen with the characters, all that fun stuff. But all in all, I really did enjoy the last section of the game. I didn't even mention the Temple of the Ancient fight with the Turks. Oh my gosh, poor Elena. I whooped on that woman so hard, she didn't stand a chance. But getting to fight them, and then of course continuing on with what we just talked about with the Genova battle and Sephiroth. And then speaking of part 3, we're going to very quickly go to IGN and look at another article they did with Hamaguchi where they talk about Rocket Town and Cid and how they're going to be in part 3. Hamaguchi says, so as for Rocket Town, this was also not a part of Nojima-san's original structure, and considering that how we introduced the character, Cid, for the remake series, this time is arranged a bit differently. Nojima-san, Nomura-san, and I were all aligned with this decision to consider this for the next title. And I did see some people out there saying that they were worried about how they're going to handle Cid. They feel like maybe they changed him too much. For me personally, I cannot judge the Cid character until we get to Rocket Town, because that's where we're going to get the fleshed out story of Cid. I think we're going to see his full personality really pop out and how he's going to handle different things. But they did change some things for Rebirth, like maybe this was in the OG and I just forgot, but Cid knew Aerith's mom, which I thought was pretty cool. And I think the way that they introduced Cid into Rebirth is actually really smart. So it's not like we just go to Rocket Town and meet this dude. There's a reason for our party to communicate with him and have him, basically shuttle us around the world to get to different destinations. And getting to fly the tiny Bronco was super cool, even though it was very limited. It's kind of like a little taste of what we could get with the High Wind. And then getting to use the tiny Bronco to traverse the Meridian Ocean was a ton of fun, to find treasure, to fight Gilgamesh when you did all of the Proto-Relic missions. So to see Rocket Town really fleshed out in part 3 is going to be super exciting. Of course, we're going to go to space because we're going to have that Magnus materia that we're going to need to get our hands on. And just seeing the character fleshed out more is going to be really exciting, as well as Vincent. Oh my god, how did I not talk about Vincent in this video? Needless to say, Vincent was sick. How they introduced him as well. I was not expecting there to be a boss battle, but I lost my mind. And that entire section where Vincent just loses it and transforms into the Galleon Beast, it's like that episode of The Office where there's a fire that happens and the alarms start going off and everyone just starts freaking out. People are starting to jump out windows, they're trying to climb through ceilings, they're trying to hide under desks. That entire office scene is how I felt about the Galleon Beast battle. Everyone's just fighting for their life, trying to figure out who this dude is. Why did he transform into this monster? It was so well done. I loved it, and I can't wait to see Vincent's gameplay in part 3 because I kind of think we just saw a preview of how they're going to handle his limit break. He's going to transform, he's going to act as a summon so we can't control him. We might not even be able to give him commands, but I think this is a preview of what he's going to do in part 3. So my apologies for the super long video. I was trying to fit so much into this, talking about the article, but also talking about how I felt about the ending of the game. And again, like if you didn't like it, that's totally cool. People didn't like the ending to Remake. They're not going to like the ending to Rebirth. Totally fine. I just ask that people in the comments, just keep things civil when you talk about this stuff, because we're all fans. We're all just here to talk about some fun stuff and theory craft and just have fun. What was your favorite thing about the last section of the game? Because for me, it was seeing Cloud and Zack team up to fight Sephiroth. I will see you guys in the next video. Please remember to always be excellent to one another.